After a near-fatal plane crash in World War II, Olympian Louis Zamperini spends a harrowing 47 days in a raft with 2 fellow crewmen before he's caught by the Japanese Navy and sent to a prisoner-of-war camp. Welcome back to Movies Explained. Today's film is an action drama from 2014 titled Unbroken. Bombers from the U.S. Air Corps are on a bombing mission somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. Louis and his crew arrive at a Japanese-held island and immediately begin taking heavy fire from below. They locate and destroy their target but take heavy damage from Japanese fighter planes. Many are injured but they're able to safely return and land the plane. Louis has a flashback to his childhood, where he's attending church with his family, who are Italian immigrants. Louis runs from the police and hides everything he's stolen in his secret stash. The kids from the neighborhood bully him and tell him to go back to his country. As they beat him, a police officer sees him and takes him home to his mom, telling her that he was fighting again and drinking alcohol from a painted milk jar. Louis's brother translates what the officer says to his mother. Louis gets a paddling from his father, who explains to him that they are already disliked in the neighborhood because they're immigrants, and warns him not to make things worse. The following day he's back to his old ways again, drinking alcohol under the bleachers and looking up skirts, but when he gets spotted, he runs away so fast that his older brother notices his potential and begins to train him for the track team. Louis excels at the sport and goes on to represent the United States at the 1936 Summer Olympics in Berlin. In the present day, the crew of the downed plane has been relocated to Hawaii to await redeployment. Louis amazes his fellow soldiers by continuing to train and breaking the 4-minute mile. The men are sent on a mission to find a missing crew of a downed plane. They are given another plane, but it is in poor condition. During the search, mechanical problems cause the plane to crash into the ocean off the coast of Oahu, killing 8 of the 11 men on board. Only Louis, Phil, and Mac survive and climb aboard the lifeboats. Louis checks their rations and notices that all they have is some chocolate and a little bit of water. They decide to have a piece of chocolate twice a day and a few sips of water each until they get rescued. On the second day, an airplane hovers above, and the men attempt to signal it with dye and a flare gun, but the plane just passes without seeing them. Their condition becomes more dire as time passes. They've been attacked by bugs and are very dehydrated. They continue to battle, despite Mac's growing despair. Eventually their resources are depleted. In the midst of their lengthy struggle to live, they grab an albatross that has landed on their boat and attempt to eat it but get sick and begin vomiting. Instead, they use it as bait and are able to catch a fish, which they quickly devour. After floating for 18 days, the guys are exhausted when they wake up one morning to a thunderstorm. They eagerly fill up their jars with clean water and drink the raindrops. After surviving the dangerous storm, Louis makes a pact with God that if he survives, he would serve him for the rest of his life. After 29 days, Louis manages to grab a shark from the water which they stab and begin feasting. Hours later, another aircraft passes above, and they use their flare gun to draw attention to themselves. The aircraft circles, and everyone is excited that they will be saved after a grueling 4 weeks. But suddenly the aircraft starts shooting at them as they all dive into the sea to escape the gunfire. They return to the lifeboat, but the plane turns around and the shooting continues. Mac and Phil gather back on the boat as Louis dives back into the ocean. Louis crawls back on the boat and is excited to see that the guys are okay. The aircraft vanishes, and they begin patching up the holes to stay afloat, nearly being attacked by a shark in the process. Day 45 and Mac has become very ill. Louis and Phil comfort him with words dear to his heart as he passes and is given a burial at sea. Shortly after, Louis wakes Phil informing him that he has good news and bad. They have been rescued, but by the Japanese. And the real nightmare begins. They are taken to a forest and housed in small wooden shacks. Louis can immediately hear the agony of a prisoner yelling as he is beaten by the guards. He is taken to an officer, who interrogates him. He wants to know radar locations, so Louis creates a fake sketch and informs Phil so he can do the same. He shows Louis a newspaper cutout of himself competing in the Olympics. They are brought out the next day and forced to strip and kneel while being pelted with ice-cold water. The next day, they are boarded on a ship and transported to a POW camp in Tokyo. Louis tells the prisoners in the truck that he was supposed to race here for the Olympics before it was cancelled. They get lined up and listen as Japanese Corporal Watanabe gives them the rundown of the POW camp. He informs them that they are enemies of Japan and they will be treated accordingly. As he speaks, he notices Louis looking at him. He commands Louis to look him in the eyes as he whacks him on the head, and he does so repeatedly until he instructs Louis not to look at him. Inside the barracks, the guys tell him about Corporal Watanabe, whom they call the bird because he hears everything, and would kill them if they called him what he truly deserves. He comes from a wealthy family and wanted to be an officer but was turned down, which is why they believe he is so sadistic. Commander Fitzgerald greets Louis and advises him to get some rest. The next day, after being forced to do some awkward exercises, the bird declares that they are surrounded by renowned individuals and has an opera singer and chef identify himself before asking who is the Olympic athlete. Louis is forced to identify himself and compete against a young Japanese kid. He collapses on the ground, exhausted from malnourishment. The bird ridicules his weakness and beats him with his stick. The next day, when they empty the toilets, one of the prisoners makes a joke about how much poop has accumulated from a group of guys who rarely eat. The guards storm in for a surprise inspection, discover some contraband, and severely beat one of the prisoners. Louis tells Commander Fitzgerald how he wants to kill them. Fitzgerald tells him that the only way they can beat them is if they survive the war. Later, Watanabe summons Louis and introduces him to a group of men in suits from a radio station called Radio Tokyo. They inform Louis that his government has declared him dead. They want to give him the opportunity to speak on the radio and inform his family that he is still alive. They transport Louis to the radio station, and along the way, Louis warns them that he will only say what he wants. Louis takes the microphone and delivers a heartfelt emotional message. He informs his family that he is fine. He breaks down in tears as he wishes them a Merry Christmas. Louis is treated to lunch, and he is invited to stay and speak with them again. They give him a script to read, but Louis declines, claiming that he is unable to say those things about America because they are untrue. 3 Americans seated behind him are pointed out by the radio station executives, who inform him that they have agreed and are now in excellent health. They ask Louis if he wants to return to the POW camp or join those men. Louis chooses to remain loyal to his country and is returned to prison. Watanabe commends him for his bravery, telling Louis that he likes him but that he is still an enemy of Japan, and that he must be punished for refusing to do what was asked of him. He directs that every prisoner in the camp approach Louis and punch him. The men initially refuse, but Watanabe orders his men to bring the prisoner who was caught with the contraband and severely beaten. He begins to beat him until they obey his commands. Louis yells at the men to do what he wants before they kill him. They punch him one by one until he is unable to stand. The following day, while the men are performing a play, Watanabe sits next to Louis and informs him of his promotion, telling him that he will be leaving, and asks Louis to congratulate him, but Louis remains silent. The men line up to see him off. Life at the camp gets much better with Watanabe gone. Days later, at night, sirens sound as large explosions occur. The town next to the camp is being bombed by the Allies. The inmates are rushed outside to put out the fires. The men are overjoyed that the Allies have made it this far, but Commander Fitzgerald informs them that he overheard the guards discussing executing them if the Allies win. The men are awakened in the morning with the news that they are being relocated to a new camp. They see the devastating damage done by the Allies as they march through the town that was bombed during the night. People are sobbing next to their loved ones who were killed in the bombing. The inmates board a train and are transported to the new camp. As they walk, they notice other prisoners doing what appears to be very hard labor work at a coal factory. Louis nearly collapses when he notices the person approaching to address them is Watanabe. He gives them the same speech he gave months ago at the camp. He questions Louis's refusal to look him in the eyes as he knocks him down with a blow to the head with his baton. The men are housed in their new locations, and Louis begins to look increasingly hopeless. The cruelty continues as the men are forced to carry heavy loads of coal every day, with people passing out daily. The prisoners are also informed of President Roosevelt's death in April 1945. One of the prisoners bursts into tears. Watanabe pulls Louis out of line while he's working. He tells him to lift a large wooden beam over his head, and if he drops it, the guard is to shoot him. Everyone comes to a halt as they quietly mumble encouraging words. He lifts the beam higher just as he appears to be about to drop it, which amazes Watanabe because he can't break him. He tells Louis to stop staring at him, but Louis keeps staring him down while holding the beam over his head. Watanabe beats him until he collapses. The following day, as everyone is lined up, a guard announces that the war is over. The men listen in disbelief as the guard instructs them to be taken to the river to wash up and get cleaned up. The men believe they are about to get executed as they hopelessly march towards the river. As they stand there, an Allied plane cruises overhead, and as it circles back around, is when the men finally realize that it's really over. Everyone cheers and rejoices. The plane drops supplies that includes food, cigarettes, and magazines. They eat and celebrate, waiting to be picked up. As they arrive home, Louis kisses the ground as his family runs to greet him. In 1946 Louis Zamperini met and married his beloved 𝒍𝒊𝒌𝒆. They had a daughter, Chrissy, and a son, Luke. Lieutenant Russell Phillips, Phil, survived the war and married his sweetheart, 𝒂𝒎𝒎𝒆. He and Louis remained friends long after the war. Matsuhiro Watanabe, the Bird, remained in hiding for several years as a war criminal until he was granted amnesty by the US in its efforts to reconcile with Japan. After years of post-traumatic stress, Louis made good on his promise to serve God, a decision he credited with saving his life. Motivated by his faith, Louis came to see that the way forward was not revenge, but forgiveness. He returned to Japan, where he found and made peace with his former captors. Only the Bird refused to meet him. Louis finally realized his dream, and ran again in the Olympics at age 80 in Japan. Unbroken and a true statesman, Louis passed away in 2014. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more videos.